Alrighty, my friends, we are in a Loom video. Why are we in a Loom video? Because today I made a mistake on the live call, and if you were on it, you know what happened. But after I went through the slides that we're going to go over here, instead of closing the window to share my screen, I accidentally ended the entire call. And then we jumped to Zoom because nobody knew what was going on. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to restart Webinar Jam. We went over to Zoom. That capped at 100 members, and then we figured we can't do that either. So I restarted Webinar Jam. We got back in there, and we finished the call. So you'll see that after the actual slides. But all in all, to make up for that blunder of mine, we're going to do an extra call, a Q&A call, 2 Mondays from now. So the calls have been Monday, Wednesday, and then Wednesday is the next call, and then we'll do Monday Monday will be an extra Q&A call to make sure we give that extra value, just because I feel so bad for actually ending that call. I was very upset at myself, and many of you saw that on the call, but humans are humans. I am not infallible. I don't even know what that word means, but I am not it. So in this call, let's just dive straight into it, because now that I've gone through it once and I've tried recording this another time, I messed up. So 3rd time's through, I have a pretty good grasp on what we're going to talk about here. So let's just dive straight into it. So in this call, we're dissecting high-performing content. What will be covered? Frameworks and resources that complement the previous content curriculum call, which is call number 2 in the dashboard. So these 2 calls mesh together very well. This is like an addition to that call to bring more nuance. With that, it can get very overwhelming very quick. I just want to make it known here and now that all of this is about practice, right? You aren't going to be able to implement every single thing that I talk about all at once in all of your content. It's just not going to work that way. You have to focus on implementing one thing in like one tweet, and then try implementing another thing, and then another thing, and you use everything we talk about not only to hold top of mind so it helps you create better content, but also you try to implement one thing at a time in all pieces of content that you write. And that's how you get better at it. And that's how it becomes second nature, because everything that we're going to talk about is something that I can talk about off the top of my head, because it's just so second nature to me now that like I'm quick at writing content just because I've practiced for 3 to 4 years, right? If not longer than that. And so the next thing is we're going to go over in this slide a content checklist that will increase your engagement with time. And then after this slide, which was already recorded, I did get that replay from the live call, but we're going to go over how my content has evolved both on Twitter, so in terms of ideas, and YouTube in terms of overall structure of long form content. Then the last thing we're going to go over is a short case study on one of my favorite content writers and what you can learn from them to stand out from almost everyone. So the agenda, just quick and dirty. We're going to go over the checklist and framework for content in this slide. Then we're going to go over my content evolution. So I'll run through my tweets and newsletters and how that translates over to YouTube videos. And then we're going to go over the case study and look at that account. So please note, well, I don't really have to say this in here, but last 2 calls will be dedicated to questions. So save your questions, keep them top of mind, write them down if you have to, because I will be asking for them in the last 2 calls. Okay. So let's get into it. The value creation framework, which I consider the universal framework, because I've noted this pattern throughout my years of not only business development, but personal development, and really anything. This is just the pattern of human behavior in general, right? This is a huge part of my book. This is a driving force of my content. This is also a content, it's a landing page framework. It's a content framework. It is a product framework if you're actually creating a product. It's everything. This is just the foundation of human behavior and how to get people to act and how to be persuasive and just how to articulate really anything. You can use this when you're meeting new people, right? Or just when you're in a conversation with someone and want to learn how to articulate your ideas. So it's priority, path, purpose. So priority is pertaining to the problem. So what is the burning problem in someone's life? What is the priority problem that they need to solve in order to reach the next level of understanding or skill acquisition or development or whatever the next level is in whatever topic you talk about, right? The next thing is the path. So how do you overcome the problem, preferably in a novel way? So from your personal experience, which we'll talk about in the framework itself, but the path or mechanism or steps to actually reaching step 3, which is purpose or the desired outcome or the goal and the benefits associated with it, right? So this is just human behavior in a nutshell, where someone becomes aware of a problem. So if you're not aware that there was such a good example of this the other day that I had top of mind, and I'm not going to be able to think of it, but you're not going to be able to change something unless you identify the problem in your life. If you are in an environment where being unhealthy and overweight is normalized, or it is conditioned into your head that it's just a normal way of living and that you should feel bad and you should feel groggy and you should feel tired, until someone comes in and makes you aware that that actually is a problem that is preventing you from reaching whatever desired outcome that it is that you want to reach, because all humans want something more. That's why we get so addicted to like the cheap dopamine stuff. But that's just the thing. You have to become aware of a problem in order to change. And most people don't target problems. They just assume that people understand what their problems are, right? So the next thing, and then you go path and purpose. Well, this will make a lot more sense as we get into it, but just keep this in mind right now. You can use this as a content framework, newsletter. You start with a problem, and then you give people the path, and then you give people the benefits to actually reaching that desired outcome. And you dance between the two. So to start, we have to understand the levels of awareness, because if we're starting with a problem, we have to understand, or we have to keep in mind at all times, no matter where people are in our audience, because everyone's at a different level of awareness pertaining to what you're talking to, right? A tweet that you write may hit, like for 50% of people, it may make absolute sense, but the other 50% of people, they don't get what you're saying. They have no idea, and you need to either explain it to them a better way, or you just need to like continue writing content in a way that will slowly introduce them to your products, services, content, value you have to offer, right? So just to start here, everyone in your audience will land within the 5 levels of awareness, whether that be in your bio, when they look at your profile picture, when they read a reply that you leave under someone else's post, in the DMs, on the landing page to your lead magnet, on the sales page to your product or service. Whenever a tweet shows up on someone else's timeline, whether they're looking at your profile or if your tweet gets retweeted to someone else, what state of mind is someone in when they're scrolling the timeline and seeing your tweet? Most people don't think this deep about content. They just write the content, send it out, and expect it to work. But you have to think of all angles. Where is everyone going to see your content? What phase of life are they in? What state of mind are they in? Are they even aware? Do they understand anything of what you're talking about? And how can you speak to them? So the next key insight here is that you have to always remember that 95% of the market are beginners, right? Yes, even those that you plan to sell your service to. So the way that I like to put this is that web design, as an example, if I plan to sell a web design product or talk about web design, people think that they just, like, if they start talking about web design from a very beginner level, that they're going to have a lot of competition. When in reality, under a personal brand, which is what we're trying to build here, you are probably going to be the first person to introduce them to web design, right? And that way, like, they're not going to, you're not trying to target people that are already watching YouTube videos on web design, how to create websites, maybe taking a college course on it. You want to introduce them to the skill, how it's going to solve a problem in their life, and how it's going to benefit them if they learn web design, right? And by doing that, many people don't understand this, and they try to write content that's super high level, super advanced, trying to like impress other people when they're impressing no one. Because think about it, if you're writing high level and you're trying to attract like high level business clients and showing what you know about web design, that tweet isn't even going to get retweeted, because you're not speaking to people that will retweet it, right? But if you write broad and beginner level and target from levels 1 to 3 of the levels of awareness around web design, Like, let's take a problem. So not being able to get a job. So that's a reason to learn web design, where if you can't get a job, consider learning web design. Not only is it a creative and fun skill to learn, but you can learn it within a week thanks to the free education on the internet, right? And then you introduce them to web design. And if your ideas are good, you're going to attract the high level people because they see, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about pertaining to web design, even though I don't really care about this tweet, but I need a website, so I'm going to reach out to him and hire him, right? So going broad and beginner level is usually the best thing you can do in my eyes, especially if you're trying to go big, broad, build a large and leverageable audience rather than trying to go too high level and not getting your content spread and not getting many, if any, followers at all and stagnating your audience growth. So then you don't have any room to position or pivot what you offer in the future. Because I'm assuming most freelancers don't want to do client work all the time. That's why you're going for this personal brand thing, is so you can have leverage and you can build something like a digital product or even a physical product or whatever you want to sell in the future, right? So that was just a long-winded way of getting into what the actual levels of awareness are. But really, when you're writing content, we're only going to be paying attention to levels 1 through 3. So the first one is unaware. So they're unaware of you, their problem, and a potential solution. So they're just unaware of everything. Problem aware is where they're aware they have a problem but don't know how to fix it. And then 3, solution aware, is they're aware that there is a solution to their problems. So this is where all of your content is revolving around. And you're usually talking, you're attracting people via the problems you talk about, the steps that you give to overcome it, and the reasons that they should overcome it, right? The purpose. And then when they reach level 3 from your tweets, newsletter, whatever, you nurture them to that point. You educate them to becoming customers or clients, right? You don't just target a client immediately and hope that they pay you. So then when they reach level 4, which is product aware, so that they're aware that there is a product that offers a solution, pretty much your product because they're in your audience, and then most aware, they're ready to buy if the message is presented, right? If the right message is presented. So I don't necessarily recommend this per se, but you can like throw in a discount, or you can add some form of scarcity tactic, or you can have a special, or you can add on a bonus to make it seem more valuable, or you just get creative, right? Or you just have to present a good enough argument to level 5 people so that they finally pull the trigger and buy your product or service. That's what I like to do, is I like to present good arguments rather than discount things. So how do I go back? Okay. So we're still on step number 1 of the value creation framework, right? Because we have to nail the problem. We have to get it right. So we're targeting a problem from levels 1 through 3. We're going very beginner and basic level. Now, what do we do next? And this is all pertaining to the topic or skill or interest that you plan to talk about in your content, right? So what we do once we have the problem and the level of awareness that we're trying to target, we go after the 8 human desires. And so after this, I show you where this is in the Notion template itself. But since we're in the slideshow, I can't really do that for you. And so the 8 human desires are survival, life enjoyment, social acceptance, sexual companionship, freedom from fear, comfort and clarity, perceived status, and safety of tribe. So if we take, this is how we position or we angle our content, right? So for a tweet, let's say around web design as an example, what is a survival-based problem that targets level 1 through 3 or is like framed levels 1 through 3 of awareness for survival? So some problems relating to that are that people don't have enough money to pay the bills. Just an example. Or they don't have enough money to go out and do the things that they enjoy doing. They're in a state of survival and working a job that they don't enjoy. And so web design can come in and be the solution to that so that they can, sorry, my eye's itching. But if you're trying to help people either get a better job with web design or learn a creative skill, so they can use it as a hobby, or create a website for their business so they can get more leads, then you can frame that around any one of these 8 human desires in order to make it more impactful. Now, some will apply more than others, like sexual companionship, but this is how you angle the problem and kind of start off your content, right? So if I were to come up with a tweet off the top of my head for the survival angle, because survival is arguably like one of the most potent one of these, but the survival angle for web design, let's come up with like a one-liner tweet. So if you struggle to pay the bills every month and you are not learning a new skill, how do you expect to break out of that state of living, right? So that's a one-liner tweet. And then that hints at skill acquisition rather than web design. But then if you wanted, you could plug a web design article or a newsletter, previous newsletter, a lead magnet, or a like product itself on the skill that you recommend learning that is web design, right? So you're framing everything from the problem so that you can lead into something else. So now the value creation framework, what we do after we have the angle and positioning for what we're trying to write is, one, the big problem. So we already talked about this, but what is the biggest problem relating to the topic, skill, or interest you plan to talk about? Okay, we talked about that quite a bit. Just sit there and brainstorm problems. This works best when you're actually writing things, right? It's very hard to do in your head. You have to sit down and just start writing and refining. And so then once you have the big problem, what's the unique mechanism? What are your steps to overcoming the problem? This can be based off of experience or research, but preferably experience, because the way that I think about it is I like to self-reflect and give steps that are very unique, right? Because I can go and copy like, how to form habits and curate James Clear's content, but you aren't going to build a very impactful name for yourself being a curator. It's a good thing to do and it's helpful, but you need to be coming up with your own original processes, systems, ideas, and mechanisms for all of this stuff. So for like, if you're writing about habits, how would you go about forming a new habit, right? What have you researched? What have you done in your life? What are the steps you've taken? And then you come up with the steps, and that can be a list, like the 5 steps to forming powerful habits, and then you list them off. That can be a tweet. That can be turned into a thread with 5 tweets, breaking down the points even further. And then it can be turned into a newsletter and YouTube video that way, right? So the next thing is big benefits, because you have to persuade people to overcome the problems that they're facing. All of marketing is a back and forth between the problem and the benefit. So the pain and the benefit. And so how the problem is impacting their life and why they need to change, and the reason, the like big benefit for overcoming that problem. So for web design, it's that you learn a creative skill, you have a new hobby, you increase your earning potential through skill acquisition. You can start freelancing with web design. You can get a better job with web design. You can have a skill that you can stack more skills on with web design, right? So you're trying to persuade people by giving them multiple reasons or whys as to why they should do what you're saying or recommending, okay? And all of these are like Legos when you are writing content. You can use each and every one of these for individual tweets, or you can use them as building blocks throughout your like long form content like YouTube and newsletter. And so the next thing is proof. So a lot of people get tripped up on proof, whether it be like putting testimonials on a landing page or something like that. But you can use your own results, right? You can use your own results. You can use client results, or if you don't have either of those, you can use statistics, quotes, or curated content to strengthen your argument. If you can formulate, like use quotes in your newsletter or in your YouTube video from a popular person that helps frame the argument you're trying to present, it becomes that much more impactful because other people start to relate that authority to what you're saying, okay? Very important there. The next is the big idea. And again, with all of this, this seems very, if you only pay attention to this video alone, it seems very out of context, right? You have to watch the first video on the content curriculum call. But the next thing is the big idea. So out of everything you fleshed out and brainstormed here for your content, what is a one sentence summary of the point you're trying to get across, right? The big idea is kind of difficult to come up with, but it can be any of these. So the big idea can be a big problem, it can be your unique mechanism and what you call it. It can be a big benefit that you've listed out. It could be the statistic, right? So a statistic that I love that would help frame my argument or even be a hook for my content would be that I've used this before, but 36% of the workforce are freelancers, right? So I can use that as a way to present an argument that more people are going to become freelancers, that a lot of them are going to be web designers, and that industry is going to start doing a lot better. And that alone can be the big idea because it catches the most attention. And so now risk reversal is something that comes more into play with landing pages and sales pages, but like a money back guarantee. But how can you make it stupid to not take action, right? How can you present your argument in a way that makes it like almost automatic for them to see the value in doing so? Okay. So these are just all things to keep in mind as you're writing your content. And we'll go over how these like relate to the content that I've written. And I also want you to use these as a lens to view the content that you consume, right? Because before all of this, I'm assuming that you were just like consuming content and you thought it was good. And now that you want to become a creator or start a personal brand, you're viewing it through the lens of, oh, I can use that. Like you're looking at the structure of the tweets rather than what they're saying. And you're thinking, oh, why did this one do so well? I need to take the essence of this post and use it for my own. And so that's what I'm telling you to do here is pay attention to how these things are used on the timeline, in YouTube videos and sales pages. And eventually you'll be able to use your findings or the lessons you find from that in your own content. I'm going to take a sip of water with electrolytes in it. But lastly, let's go over the content checklist. So this is just something you can use because, as I said previously, all of this is like up for you to practice, okay? Because you're not going to be able to do all of this in one. It's actually going to be very difficult to do all of this in one. You just have to come back to this practice and get better with the content that you create over time. So the first step in content is that, are you capturing attention capture? And we went over this in the first content call, but the 10 commandments of engagement will help you a lot with that. But if you don't capture attention, you're not going to, like, people aren't going to read the rest of your stuff. They're not going to click onto your profile. They're not going to follow you. They're not going to go to your lead magnet. You have to guide their attention and catch attention throughout where everyone is seeing your stuff. And now I don't want to hear any arguments about how this is unethical when you're trying to catch attention at any given moment. Like, I could argue that you telling me something is unethical is you using a negativity bias to catch my attention, and you're trying to sell me the idea that capturing attention is bad. This is what we're all doing when we communicate with anyone. You have to capture attention in order for your ideas to get across. And I would argue that not capturing attention is unethical because you're not giving yourself a fighting chance at delivering the value that you have to offer. Okay, so the next thing is perspective. And this comes with time, but are you providing a unique perspective to a great idea? Because you don't want to just rehash what people have said all before. You want to provide something that is unique to you. And usually the best way to do this is through personal experience and reflecting on your own experience. And so the next content checklist that is very important is tone and articulation. So are you speaking with the tone and articulation that you want to emulate? And what I mean by this is, I personally resonate the most with like Naval's tweets or Aristotle's writing, like very pithy writing, and also like harsh truths. Like I don't know. I just really like when people like yell at me and tell me what to do, where it's like, hey, go and fucking start a business. And that resonates with me. And it's like, okay, yeah, I will. Thank you. Thank you for being confident, which is actually the next one, which is confidence. Are you confident in your words and eliminating fillers? Because I see this all too often when people will, like, they just don't feel confident in what they're writing about. They write something like, maybe, how do I put it? If you tried to learn web design, maybe you would see, or maybe you would get a better job. Bad example. But then I can say, if you learn web design, you open up the potential to get a high paying job. We go over this more in the first video, but confidence is really important. So it's like, you need to pay attention as to whether you're holding yourself back or you're watering down your message simply because you're afraid of what people think, or that they're going to challenge your ideas when they're not going to challenge your ideas, right? And even if they do, it's like, okay, I learned something from this, and now you can give better information. That's called trial and error. That's how you learn. So the next thing is pains and benefits. So when you're actually writing content, are you making sure that you're including or hitting relevant pains or benefits? That's what's going to be the bread and butter of your persuasive and impactful writing. Okay? So just before you press post, please make sure that there are pains and benefits in there, or one of, usually pains or benefits, not both. Because I see that all too often where, like, people will send the hook to a thread, or they'll send me a tweet, or they'll send me something else, and there's just no pains, there's no benefits. It's just like they wrote something and it's like, okay, cool, this doesn't really, like, how does this apply to me at all? And that leads into the last one, which is value. Is, do you answer the question, what's in it for me? Or do you imply an answer to the question, what's in it for me? Are you actually giving them something, or that they resonate with, or are you just writing to write? It doesn't make sense if you, like, why are you writing if you're not giving people something to actually use in their lives, even if that's just like an intangible mindset tip, right? So all of those are things that you should pay attention to. Again, this is very up in the air, like the last call was, and it's providing context and more firepower to what we talked about in the first call. So since this is a Loom video, the format of this is going to change a bit, and we're going to go into the next part of the call. So I guess I'll see you there virtually. Okay, we're here. Okay, so first thing, what we just talked about when we talked about problems and or the big problems and the awareness, levels of awareness associated with those, and the human desires to help bring a different angle to that problem and talk about it from a way that is going to be desirable to the other person. These are different ways to do that. And this is so important, because you are using this to frame the entirety of a tweet or an article. And another thing is that when you don't have enough, like when you don't have an idea of how to transition in, let's say, a YouTube video or a newsletter or an article, then you can use one of these to kind of like pivot and just take a new direction while still keeping it interesting, right? So Scamper, we talked about this in a previous curriculum call. This is kind of just how you can like exchange or change different parts of an idea to reformat it in different ways. We talked about this then. But here, this is just kind of a cheat sheet, and you can find all of this in the Inspiration Lab in the Notion template that's in the dashboard. It's all the way at the bottom, right? So when you're on this page, it's in the Inspiration Lab, and then all the way to the bottom. And you can use this when you have an idea in your mind, or a topic you want to talk about, or a problem you want to target, or even just an idea, right? Really anything. You can come in here and think, okay, what is the survival angle of this? What is the life enjoyment angle of this, right? So if we bring back the example of web design, the life enjoyment problem or goal that we're kind of dancing between is that by having a creative skill that can make you money, and since you're freelancing and have more time on your hands, you're going to be able to have more time to fill it with the things that you enjoy. And if you know your customer very well, or you know your audience very well, or if you are writing to yourself, like I recommend in many cases, and you know yourself well, what are the things that you enjoy, and how does the topic or skill or whatever it is that you're talking about or teaching about help people do more of that from the life enjoyment angle, right? So this just lets you brainstorm different ways of thinking about ideas or topics that you're trying to articulate. And that's the same with all of these. Now, some of them may not apply, of course, to certain things. I mean, you can like finagle your way to it. So web design and sexual companionship, I don't really care to talk about this on a call, but you could frame it from like, oh, you're going to be learning a skill that allows you to join communities, and then I don't know, it can go from there. But you get the point where you can like make mental connections between things in order to help people get the desired outcomes that they want in their life, whether that be sex or survival or even just life enjoyment and being more at peace in the world. Okay. But now that we have all of this and we have kind of everything that we just talked about in our mind to help us not only write our own content, but view other people's content from this lens, we can do that better. And what I mean by that is like perceiving content from the lens of a creator, because I'm sure many of you have noticed or will notice that when you're on Twitter or on YouTube or on Instagram, since you have the goal of becoming a creator or even just starting a business or whatever it may be, you start to watch that content from like okay, how can I use this to make my own better, right? So that's what I'm getting at here from everything that we talked about. So now I've kind of kept this. I haven't been keeping up with it recently because I don't see a point in it for me to do so. But what I highly recommend people do at the start of their journey is to pay very close attention to their top performing content. And what I mean by that is going back at the end of every month and just looking through your tweets and having a page in Notion or somewhere else that allows you to keep them like organized like this. However you want, really. This is kind of just my way of doing it, is having them like in little toggles, and then you can embed the tweet here. And it doesn't have to be a tweet. It can be anything really, but you can see the engagement here, and we'll see kind of how I figure these things out or figure out what my best performing content was at the time that you can put into here. But let's just look at the content that I used to write, and you can start to see like already that at the beginning, so January through, this goes down to February, March, but January through May, I was writing a lot of lists and very like broken apart tweets, like a lot of line breaks, very long. They took up a lot of attention. I mean, a lot of space on the screen. So they had more room to catch attention, right? Because that's another thing to think about is over here, when I'm writing a very short and like hard hitting tweet, so to say, it's not taking up very much space. And then you're kind of relying on the entirety of your profile picture, your your username, or your just name, and this to catch attention for you. When if it's taking up the entirety of their screen, it's going to be a lot harder for them not to stop. You know what I mean? So there's other intangible things that allow you to catch attention rather than just like the first line of your tweet. Okay, so let's look at these a bit. So here, I don't know if I should read, it'll take a bit of time, okay? Winners have structure, set times for waking up, meditation, focused work, hitting the gym, going to bed. I have yet to meet a person that does the opposite of these, that is consistently happy, productive, and disciplined, okay? So there is a lot to like dissect here in terms of what made this do well at close to the very start of my journey. Because from what I remember, November of 2019, so 2 months before this, was when I wrote my first tweet. And then it was a bit like here and there before, or I mean, it was scattered. Like I wasn't writing every day then. Then December, I started writing every day, connecting with people, doing everything like to get eyes on my profile, like I always say to do, DMing people. I may have met like Joey around this time. It may have been even later, but that's why I'm getting decent engagement on this, is because I did what I said to, like, I practiced what I preached in the previous curriculum calls and really anything else that I put out there. So here, let's dissect this. So winners have structure right there. That's the big idea, right? So we talked about the big idea. The big idea, again, it's kind of hard to articulate, but that's what it is here, is winners have structure. That catches attention. That opens a curiosity loop. It's like, okay, what's next? Like, if winners have structure, how do I create structure? There's a bunch of questions that can come from that allow people to like stay there and figure out what it is that you're talking about. And then set times for list. So lists here, or the bullet spray of, or this is kind of like a deconstructed and like on non-linear and non-ordered unique mechanism or path, right? So waking up, meditation, focused work, hitting the gym, going to bed. It's just a list. It's steps. It brings clarity to what people should do to, in a very broad sense, because I like to target beginners, is that this is, in a sense, how you become a winner, right? I cringe at all of my content, but that's how I wrote it then. So the last line here, I have yet to meet a person that does the opposite of these, that is consistently happy, productive, and disciplined. So not only is this perspective, so it's a bit more unique and brings a new lens to it, but it also implies the pains and benefits, right? So I've yet to meet a person that does the opposite of these, that is consistently happy, productive, and disciplined. So people that desire to be happy, productive, and disciplined and avoid being the opposite, because that image starts to form in their mind, you can see why this tweet started to do well, right? And so this can probably get incredibly long, but oh, look at this. Okay. So this is kind of like a personal thing for me right now, but the video I had, the YouTube video, was how to get ahead of 99% of people in 6 to 12 months, that like got, I don't want to say I don't care that they copied it or did it, that was a smart move on everyone's end, but there was like at least 50 other videos with the same exact title after that. So I just want to show you guys specifically that I have like more tweets on this down below, but even in 2020, like this was my thing in a sense. Not necessarily monk mode. I can't take credit for that at all, but yeah, this tweet brings back a lot of memories. So let's look at those. Okay, so how I set myself up to win the day. So you've got big idea. You're also implying some form of a problem here or a benefit, where, because problems and benefits are kind of implied from each, where win the day implies that some people may be losing their day. And so they want to win the day, right? So how I set myself up to win the day, and then the path to doing so. So I'm implying the problem and or the goal. Bed by 10 p.m., up at 6, chug water, straight to the gym, meditation, focused work. This has changed, but that's what I did back then. Simple stuff that will make your day productive and worry-free. So here in these tweets, it seems like I'm very big on like the benefits aspect of things. So win the day, here's the path, here's more benefits to doing so. This was more so from these. This is like a bunch of, or this is like a path or a unique mechanism or steps to doing something. So swap soda for water, swap music for podcasts, Netflix for deep work, etc., etc., etc. A better life starts with your intentional choices. So not only is that big idea, but perspective and benefit again. And so like with these, if you've watched the previous curriculum calls, you can see how all of these are starting to come together into one. Because in the first content call number 2, we talk about like calling out your target. We talk about using numbers as like a way to catch attention. We talk about being confident. And then of course we have, you should not. So this is like the opposite, or like what you should not do. So clear stuff to not doing something or avoiding something. And then again, being confident. You have absolutely zero excuses to not be working towards a better life. Don't waste the years that count. Again, on the pain. So you can see that like just by being conscious of the things that we're talking about in these trainings, that it's easier to like refine the tweets that you are writing and create one that is more cohesive. And of course, it comes with time. I had been the reason. So this is just in February and January, right? But the reason like I was able to do this well is because I was studying everyone else. I was a lurker for the longest time. I was studying copywriting. I had already like implemented copywriting in other aspects of my business. But for these, it kind of just happened naturally, where I use the same structure for almost every single one of them, but they're all unique, they're all valuable, and they all hit fairly hard. And then once you get used to these things, then like you can start to like play around with the structure. So here it's like the path to freedom in a nutshell: mind, meditate, read books, journal, health, and like 3-3-3. And you can see that it's all following a very similar structure. But that's the thing here is I've seen people that like take ideas and they're very, very similar, rather than taking the structure, finding an idea online or in a book or in a YouTube video or something like that, and then applying that idea to the structure, right? So you're not copying the idea and the structure, you're pairing ideas with different structures and then using those as training wheels to make, like, to just become second nature at writing more articulate, readable, and impactful short form content. Okay, and now let's go straight in, or let's look at my tweets from, so this was from November when I first started to January, right here, which was in here, January. And so you can see here that I saved my top tweets in this master swipe file. But you can also see that not all of my tweets were top performing, right? Like my average engagement around this time, like what, out of the 3 tweets times 30 is 90, times 3 is 180. So out of the potentially 180 tweets that I wrote in from November to January, I guess that's 2 months, so 120 tweets, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, around 8 tweets that like did well out of that. So you can see that it's less than 10%. I'm so bad at math, don't hold me to those numbers. But you can see, and then they just get like lower and lower on the way down. And the tweets that did really well were usually the ones that like I was sending to other people because I knew they would do well. I knew, like, I had a gut feeling that they were good content. I was sending them to my friends. Certain big accounts were liking the tweets because I had connected them with them earlier and they were following me. And they noticed, like, okay, yeah, this tweet has the potential to do good. They're going to like it. And just everything else that we've talked about previously. So this is just like for perspective that I was getting around this engagement in month 2. And I don't know exactly how many followers I was at that time. But then you can see here, again, for more perspective, is that it's about the same. So I'm getting a bit more here, but you go down and, oh, wow, I guess engagement was pretty high these next 2 months. So this is from January to March. So month like 4-ish. Engagement was starting to pick up consistently, mainly because I was consistent. I couldn't imagine that I was anywhere above 1,000 or 2,000 followers here. So engagement was pretty good for that time. But yeah, so looking through these, like, you can see very clearly which tweets didn't do as well and which did. So learning how to be alone with your thoughts is underrated. At the end of the day, all you have is yourself. There's not much there, right? Like, you read that and you're like, yeah, it's true, but there's a big idea, but it's not very impactful. There's no problem. There's no like benefits. There's no new perspective here. You hear this all the time with learning how to be alone with your thoughts, or just learning to be alone in general. You can tell that I was probably scrambling to write a tweet and just wrote this one. But then you go up a bit and you can see the ones that are starting to perform better. Let's look at this one. So I started to realize that like the repetition was working really well, because in this past one there was like the swap soda for water, swap music. So I would just like write one line, which is like stay calm in stressful situations, stay calm in dangerous situations, stay calm in tense situations. Losing control of your emotions guarantees a bad turnout. The calm during the storm is greater than the calm before the storm. See, and then there's perspective there. Again, I'm very critical of my tweets from the past, but at the same time, like you can see why this one is starting to like pick up more than the other ones with only like 20 likes, right? Where it has some repetition, it flows well, it has something that's relatable. Losing control of your emotions guarantees a bad turnout. That's kind of hitting a pain point, but can be worded a bit better in my eyes now. But then you have the perspective here, or that heavy hitting last line where the calm during the storm is greater than the calm before the storm. And so that gets people to think like, okay, the typical saying, what's usually said is the calm before the storm, but he's saying the calm during the storm. And that makes a lot more sense, because you're not just supposed to go crazy and let the storm control you. So if we go further into this, you can just see that I'm starting to, like, I was very big on emulating certain pieces of content very quickly, where I saw what was working, which was like the lists and this structure I would use a lot, where it's like have the big idea, have another leading line, a few steps, and then something like pain point or benefit oriented. And of course, you can see that I'm sprinkling. You can see that not all of them are going to be winners. I feel like we're getting a bit repetitive here, and I do feel like you guys get the point with all of this. So one thing, if you want to go and look through different tweets of not only me, but like other people in certain time frames, what you do is you go to Twitter advanced search. I just Google it because I don't know how to get to it on Twitter. But then you can go down to accounts. Let's say like from me, turn off replies, turn off links. You can change minimum likes, minimum replies, or you can just go to the date and start to look back like a few years earlier, where I could look at January 2021 to February 2021. And I wouldn't do too far between these, maybe like 2 months max. And then you can see that things picked up very much a year later, and things were a lot more consistent. So you can see people's journey the entire time through. Cool. So now we're going to look at the structure of my newsletters and my YouTube videos, because this is where things really started to like kick off in terms of like the progression through. This is the first newsletter that I posted, like actually to my blog. I wrote emails before this, but they were mostly like marketing emails around web design. They were very short, and they weren't an actual newsletter, right? Or a blog. And so in this, let's just look at this one. So the reason I wrote this newsletter is because I had that previous, like I knew that 4 hours of focused work was, and I mean, this is in 2021, but I'm still talking about it now. I was talking about it then. And it was something that I practiced for the longest time. But the reason I did is because first, it was something that I implemented into my life and it was very helpful. Two, I already knew that the idea was validated from like 2020. And I'm sure I wrote one of these before then as well, just because I had, like, I was reading content, I was reading books, I was reading newsletters, and I had noted that there was patterns that most successful people did focus work. Most successful people were adamant on planning their days. It was something that I did, and it was something that I saw great results from. And productivity was like one of my main pillars, just because I enjoyed learning about it. So in this, I wrote the newsletter, and you can see here that it was fairly short. Shout out Joey here. But it was very short. It was kind of all over the place, where let's just walk through like big picture structure. So being able to intentionally direct your attention at will will not only save you time, but money. See attention economy. I don't know why I put that. You can see I'm just like putting random things. This is a link to a Mark Manson article. But then I have the bullet spray pain points. So I knew that this would like start to grab and pull in attention early, where mainstream news outlets monetize your attention through fear. Social media accounts steal your attention through relatable and often self-deprecating memes. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook know exactly what colors, topics, and content delivery style make you tick. And then just going on, I straight up called out the big problem here. So if you remember from the last curriculum call and from what we talked about in this one about starting with a problem, and that's how you're kind of pulling in attention at the start, is by making the problem very clear and trying to agitate it, right? So we talked about the Pastor framework in the last call, which again starts with the problem, or the ADA framework, which starts with attention and usually revolves around talking about the problem, but just starting with a problem and a specific angle. Now, I'm trying to think which human desire I was trying to target here. It may have been a few, but you can see that I start with a problem and then I bring in like perspective, or a unique perspective around this that I had found through someone else that I saw online, right? So I had been collecting these things in my head by consuming content on social media and writing about different things. So I already had like a soft structure of the like article that I wanted to write in my mind, because I had noted the patterns between not only focused work, but like asymmetric bets. And so I started to work this in, and like it doesn't even really belong there, but it worked. And then like I'm not saying that this is the right way to do things in this article, because that didn't really even tie in with focused work. And then talking about 4 hours. So the point of me going over this one is that you can see that like I had the problem down right, but then I just wrote this on a whim. I was just throwing random things together. So like asymmetric bets and possibly how it relates to focused work, how 4 hours is more than you think. And then I just threw in Joey's 3 steps for getting into focused work, and like giving him a shout out then, which was brain dump, categorize, talk about the Eisenhower matrix, time blocking. It was very like at this point in my journey, I was still talking about like just the like what everyone else was talking about in terms of productivity, right? And so there wasn't much that separated me here. And that's probably why my YouTube video didn't do too well at the time, is because you can find that information anywhere. There wasn't like the cohesive structure that we talked about in terms of the value creation that we talked about previously in the slides. And so now coming in here with the next one, you can start to see that I began working in quotes. I didn't really start with a problem, but I just wrote, right? So this isn't too far after I wrote this first article, but I just started writing about what was on my mind. And then I created like this image where I still use this now to this day. But like with all of this, it was all clunky. It was me just like putting things out there. But one big unlock here is that I had the actionable steps at the end. I understood the path, and I knew that it had to be a unique mechanism so that I could create that perspective that people attribute to me. I realized here that creators were conceptualizing their own processes by just creating steps for people to follow, right? So I called this the conscious conditioning practice, and I just sat and wrote it down, where it's like, okay, what would I do if I wanted to change the way that I think about certain things? And so I just sat down and thought about it. It's like, first you pause. You like when you don't want to react to a thought in your head, you have to pause, you have to question it, you have to objectify that thought or realize that it is just a thought, and then you have to reframe it, and here's a few reframes, and then characterize it. So how are you going to reframe it to move you in a positive direction? Like, how can you perceive it from an angle that is conducive to the goal that you want to achieve, and then align? So here, it could be better, but you can see that I'm becoming more confident in trying to create my own way of thinking about certain things, right? By creating my own steps to overcoming the problems that I was targeting with my content. And so this actually has a decent amount of views on YouTube, but that's mainly because the views just picked up after my other videos did very well. But then this one isn't really worth going over. Like, with these, like with the older articles, even up until 2022, like they weren't that good. I was just writing like crazy, but you can see how I iterated on these in like the video I have now with the evergreen skill stack. So what I did is I pretty much wrote content for 6 months, and then from a better perspective of what I've taught in these curriculum trainings is that I came back and I wrote them from that lens so that I could articulate the ideas better. And you can tell that that brought the results on YouTube and such. And then what happened after that is I started to realize, okay, now I need to start creating my own big ideas. I have to start just thinking outside the box and like literally just creating new things. So I called this the future career path after reading a quote from Naval where I used this quote on the landing page where it's like, one day I hope there will be 7 billion businesses, or there's 7 billion people. One day I hope there's 7 billion businesses. And then that made me think like, okay, can everyone actually do this? Like, this is a very interesting big idea. How do I make it my own? And so then I conceptualized the future career path, and I started off with the problem of like people just following the default path in life. And this is the way to overcome it by pursuing your curiosity, studying certain skills, becoming an entrepreneur, creating distribution, product, leverage. And yes, so a lot of what we're talking about here will be easier to practice in the call that Joey's doing when we give like actual steps on how to write medium/long form content. But I just want to show you like the like progression from this to this was really just practice and continuing to implement the things that I knew would make it better over time. And it's very difficult to do unless you're actually writing, right? And now my newsletters kind of flow well because I just know the structure that has worked time and time again through my tweets and threads. And so that's kind of just in a nutshell the progression of YouTube, because it's the same as the newsletter. And so now for the case study of one of the accounts that I genuinely enjoy, I'm sure most of you, if you follow me on Instagram or you're on Twitter as well, you probably know Zach. His tweets are just so good. Like, they are incredibly good because like of how he approaches tweeting, right? He is of the mind, we have different opinions in terms of like using frameworks or having like systems for not only like writing content, but like scheduling and other things. Like, he is very big on just sitting down and writing and like making things unique. I'm not exactly sure on what it is that he recommends. I just remember him saying that one time. But I want you to look through. He doesn't have it pinned anymore. He has some great tweets. Let's look at his Twitter, because I can find the tweets. Not behavior hack. Oh, okay. Okay. His videos were doing really good. Okay, let's take this one for example, because he's very good at including a few different things in like his tweets, where obsession is a world of obsession is a world existing entirely in your head. So he usually always starts with some form of a big idea. Like that's his first line, is it's either quick and punchy or it's just something that makes people question like, okay, what do you actually mean here? And then he tends to like drag it on with examples where you're there 24/7, you might be doing groceries, getting coffee, out to lunch with friends, but there's an invisible infinite game going on in your mind. It never turns off, and it's the only place you want to be. And so anyone that has experienced this will be able to relate to this, and they'll be like, oh, that's such a good way of thinking about this. Because personally, the reason I like Zach's content so much relating to obsession is because there was a time in my life where I was creating the Photoshop art, and I would straight up just sit at my desk for hours upon hours forgetting to eat. And I'm pretty sure he wrote this one time in a tweet where he was like obsession is like forgetting to eat. Obsession is XYZ. And so obsession forgetting to eat, I'm like, yeah, that happened to me. That was a great time in my life. I resonate with this a lot. Now, I do want to make it very clear with Zach. I actually had notes here. Now, first off, when I show other accounts, it's especially Zach, where I'm like giving him a ton of praise. I really want people to treat this correctly, because I don't want people to take Zach's content and kind of like not copy it, but like water it down to the end of the world, because it is his unique style, and I want him to be able to maintain that. But at the same time, I do think it is important to like pull lessons from Zach, because he's doing things very differently, right? Because we talked about like what I did with very straightforward, big idea. Like I had a structure that I liked, and I went after it and replicated it multiple times. But with Zach, he's very good at like long form, or he tried different ways of doing things. He found a great way of writing, and now he's doubling down on it. And I like to incorporate some of what I've learned just from looking at his content into my content, like being more descriptive and giving more tangible examples with the things that I write. So we can probably find an example pretty easily. Like this one. So I really liked how like he starts with something very punchy, where for me it was like, be a failure, where that was just an idea on my mind for the day. I wrote it down, and then it's like, okay, I need to explain it more. So what are examples that I can give to explain this tweet? So approach the girl and get rejected, post a video and get called an idiot, start the business and watch people criticize your first move. Everyone else did it. You aren't a special case. Invest in your portfolio of failures until you can afford to succeed. And so you can see here that I'm pulling inspiration from Zach, but hopefully in a way that is unique to me, and I'm not really like taking away from his work or his brand, right? Because he has the big idea that he always starts with, where it's patience isn't about waiting, and then he goes on to explain it further, but he has different ways of doing it, where he's kind of just writing and getting the point across in a more poetic fashion. So that's what I want you to take from Zach, is that you don't have to get stuck in a lot of the templates or structures that people tell you to learn, but at the same time, like you want to use what works from both ends, and that's how you find your own way of doing it yourself, right? So that's kind of all I have for Zach and everything else here. I'm going to see if we have anything in the chat related to this. But okay, no. But before we leave, while we have people here, we'll have I have a feeling that the last Q&A call will go like a decent amount over time. If not, like we won't be able to answer all questions. And so I do think it'll be helpful to have a last call or like a bonus call either on Friday or the Monday after, right? And so that'll be kind of like a bonus, just because I was an idiot today and clicked end call. And I know that caused a big hiccup, and I think we can, I don't know, there something needs to be done about that. And I think a last final Q&A call will be valuable, because the more questions we get, especially good questions, it'll help, because it may, like, even just one question may answer, it may give the answer that someone needed, and it like causes that shift, that click that I like to call it, or the aha moment where it all just makes sense, that everyone goes through. I'm sure a lot of you have had that click multiple times in your life. Okay. Devin/Joey, were there any questions that were apparent or missed or needed to be answered? We can't hear you, Devin. Oh, is it not working again? Nope.
While Devin's figuring that out, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. While Devin's figuring that out, as Dan's mentioned a couple of times, the next session will be about writing medium form content, specifically Twitter threads is where we're going to start. And then I'll show you how I've been repurposing that content for both Instagram and LinkedIn for the ghostwriting clients I've worked with. So to help prepare you for that and get more value out of it, I recommend people checking out ChatGPT and Canva, Canva. That's a design tool. It's not going to be a ChatGPT-centric lesson, because I absolutely do not like directly use the output from ChatGPT or any AI tool to produce client content, or use ChatGPT is to shorten research. So I basically use it like a faster way to Google things and learn things about topics I don't necessarily know about. So having a bit of familiarity with that will help out. But I think the next session will be really valuable for people, because we had to repurpose content, because, up until Dan kind of set me straight last year, I always thought that I had to basically create content specifically for each platform. And so there would be stuff that I would post once on Twitter, and then I would never make use of it anywhere else. And that really held me back from getting further, like making progress on LinkedIn and Instagram. And then I finally realized, thanks to Dan mainly, that I could just repurpose that content. So I'll be showing off a process to do that quickly, so that it doesn't take a lot of time. And yeah, should be really valuable.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And that was another thing for me, is like, if anyone's wondering, I'm sure it's a question on a decent amount of people's minds, is that, like, I was very against, like, just using my newsletter as a YouTube script for the longest time, where I didn't want to do it because I felt like that it was just like repeated content. But then you have to realize that people like to consume, like, from different modalities, and they get something out of the different ways of viewing things. So if it's a newsletter, there's different lessons that can be pulled just from how that is like written. And then when it's in YouTube, that brings an entirely new dimension to it, and it can be embedded in the YouTube video itself. So I personally, like, if I'm writing like one piece of long form content and putting a lot of time into it, I want that repurposed across all different platforms, because me focusing my energy on one thing instead of like those 4 different things is going to lead to a much more valuable one thing that I can distribute 4 different ways. And nobody complains about it, if you're wondering. Like, people enjoy it more than they don't.
I was going to say it too. I've seen, can you hear me now?
Yes.
My mic's got a mute button. So I've seen people in the YouTube comments, they do like the newsletter because it's the same thing as like when you're texting someone, you can kind of miss, you have all the words there, but you don't have, the tone of voice and things like that. So it kind of helps really cement those lessons. The only thing I was going to say is the question, I did see a question and I'm actually not 100% sure before the call had issues. Do you use AI at all in your creative process? Is there any AI tools that you do use? I know like the graphs and stuff. Yeah.
No.
Right.
But that's like me being stubborn. I know that I could probably use it, but I just don't. I don't want to.
Got it.
But you look surprised. Do you have anything to say about like support?
I think I mentioned everything at the beginning of the call. If you guys do need help, do not DM me. It's too busy. I can't check DMs on every platform. Make sure you send it into the support message or the support desk. If you're having a problem accessing something and you're sending me a username, please make sure you include numbers, things like that. But besides that, it's pretty normal. So nothing crazy.
Okay. Cool. So I see a question here. We're going to answer one question. Other questions are for the Q&A calls. And now there's two. So save questions. But Marco, what are your thoughts regarding repurposing content specifically from Twitter to LinkedIn? Would the audience and content change dramatically from one platform to another? Not really, because I'm trying to build both audiences on like the same audience on both. I literally just copy one tweet over to LinkedIn every day. That's it. You can make it longer, you can make it shorter, but I'm very about, like, as I said, like focusing on good short form content, focusing on good long form content, putting all of my energy into that, and then distributing it wherever I can. Okay. And then last one, Usman, any homework today? Just write content. Like I love actionable advice as much as the next person, but really just write. Like, write with everything that we talked about today in mind, and try to apply one thing. Try to apply one thing with one piece of content, and then try to apply another thing with another piece of content. And I'm talking about short form content like tweets or posts here, because you can do that quick. But then when you're writing something long, then try to incorporate more of them. But that's really it, because you're only doing one thing. Like brand, you lock down once. Brand, Joe, turn your mic off.
I was going to add something when I have a chance.
Oh, okay. But like brand, you kind of change like once, and then you leave it and you iterate on it a few times. You can change it. But content, it's an everyday thing. That's usually the lever that you're pulling the most, and replying to other people. So practice it in your replies too. So the big problem, the big idea, the perspective, the personal experience, everything that we've talked about, just practice it in all of your writing, whether it be content or replies or even DMs to other people, without sounding like too content-y. Like, you still want to just talk in the DMs like you would text a friend. So those are my steps. Just write content. Okay, Joey.
Yeah, so something that I want to add that I think would help people is, just like Dan said, practice. Because writing, like many other skills and traits and things like that, are a lot like a muscle, right? So, last time I talked about how you don't go to the gym, work out once, and you get swole. It just doesn't work like that, even if you're taking steroids. You've got to put in the reps. There are very few people, I guarantee you, almost none of the people that you look up to were natural writers. They all went through a phase of not really knowing what they want to talk about, or not really hitting it right, or not seeing the results that they wanted. And so, like, over the past few years of working with, like, my own clients and working with Dan on things like this, I've seen so many people, like, take a product or a course or coaching or something and put like a week of effort into it and then get mad and give up. And it just doesn't work like that. So when you're sitting at your laptop, think of it like you are training a skill or training a muscle, because that's essentially what you're doing. And so you've got to keep coming back and putting in the reps and experimenting to find like what style works for you, what style works for your audience. And over time, if you're paying attention to the feedback, both externally from your audience, but also internally from what you like, then you're going to refine that over time. And then you'll look like an overnight success natural, like everybody you look up to.
Nice. Cool. All right. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to piece together the recordings since it cut in the middle. So expect the replay later today to be in your inbox, and we will go from there. We have Joey on the next call. The next call is on Monday at the same time. I promise not to hit the hang up button, but if we do, now at least we know what to do, which is not go to Zoom, which is capped at 100 members. So either way, I genuinely appreciate you guys in terms of just the hiccups here. As I said, we'll do the last Q&A or a second Q&A call and schedule that probably for the Monday at the same time, just so we're on like the same schedule. I do pinky promise, Coulter, and I'll send out an email about that as well. I saw one. Where do we find the slides? You said you're updating, Dan. So that'll be on the dashboard. So when I send the link out in the email, you'll be able to log into the dashboard. That's where all the curriculum call videos are. And then there's like a green button under each of them that allows you to download the slides relevant to those things. So in these slides, I just need to fix like the description, but like my voiceover goes more in depth anyways, just because the slide can only hold so much information. So that is it for today, guys. Appreciate you guys. Going to end it here. Hope you have an absolutely incredible rest of your day, and we'll talk in the email soon and in Monday's call. All right. See you guys.